Chapter 5: Environmental Hazards and Human Health.
Oh, forget that boring voice. The Google voice we all know and love is back. Here's the big ideas. If you are going to blank out anytime soon, please have these in your brains first.
One of the greatest risks to human health is living in crowded, unsanitary, impoverished conditions. Humans are exposed to many biological hazards including transmissible and non-transmissible diseases. Toxicologists use a variety of methods to determine how harmful a substance is to living organisms. Humans produce many chemicals, some that negatively impact the health of humans and wildlife. Lifestyle choices can put one at greater risk for premature death. And now, we have a large amount of vocab to spread. Ready? You will have approximately 5 seconds to be ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start. Acute effects usually occur rapidly as a result of short-term exposures, and are of short duration. Biological hazards refer to organisms or organic matters produced by these organisms that are harmful to human health. These include parasites, viruses, bacteria, fungi and protein. Biomagnification is the sequence of processes in an ecosystem by which higher concentrations of a particular chemical, such as the pesticide DDT, are reached in organisms higher up the food chain, generally through a series of prey-predator relationships. Carcinogens. A carcinogen is any substance, radionuclide, or radiation that is an agent directly involved in causing cancer. Chemical hazard substance that can cause harm, primarily to people. Cholera. A bacterial disease causing severe diarrhea and dehydration, usually spread in water. Chronic effect. Negative effects characterized by slowly developing symptoms on animal or human body. This is typically due to long, continuous exposure to low concentrations of a hazardous substance. Cultural hazards, also known as social hazards, result from your location, socioeconomic status, occupation and behavioral choices. For example, smoking cigarettes is hazardous to your health, and this is a behavioral choice. Dose means quantity in the fields of nutrition, medicine, and toxicology. Dose-response curve. The dose-response relationship, or exposure-response relationship, describes the change in effect on an organism caused by differing levels of exposure or doses to a stressor, usually a chemical, after a certain exposure time. Dysentery. Inflammation of the intestines accompanied by bloody diarrhea. Endocrine system. The endocrine system is the collection of glands that produce hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, and mood, among other things. Epidemic. Affecting or tending to affect a disproportionately large number of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. HIV. The human immunodeficiency virus is a lentivirus that causes HIV infection and over time acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Hormonally active agent HAA, pretty much known as endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors are chemicals that, at certain doses, can interfere with the endocrine or hormone system in mammals. These disruptions can cause cancerous tumors, birth defects, and other developmental disorders. Any system in the body controlled by hormones can be derailed by hormone disruptors. Immune system. The immune system is a system of many biological structures and processes within an organism that protects against disease. Infectious disease. Infectious diseases are disorders caused by organisms, such as bacteria, viruses, fungi or parasites. Influenza. Influenza is a viral infection that attacks your respiratory system, your nose, throat and lungs. Lifestyle choices. A choice a person makes about how to live and behave, according to their attitudes, tastes, and values. Malaria. A disease caused by a plasmodium parasite, transmitted by the bite of infected mosquitoes. The severity of malaria varies based on the species of plasmodium. Symptoms are chills, fever, and sweating, usually occurring a few weeks after being bitten. People traveling to areas where malaria is common typically take protective drugs before, during, and after their trip. Treatment includes antimalarial drugs. Median lethal dosage, aka LD50. It is the amount of the substance required, usually per body weight, to kill 50 of the test population. Mutagen. In genetics, a mutagen is a physical or chemical agent that changes the genetic material, usually DNA, of an organism and thus increases the frequency of mutations above the natural background level. Neurotoxin. Neurotoxins are substances that are poisonous or destructive to nerve tissue. Neurotoxins are an extensive class of exogenous chemical neurological insults that can adversely affect function in both developing and mature nervous tissue. Non-transmissible disease, usually referred to as non-communicable disease. A non-communicable disease, or NCD, is a medical condition or disease that can be defined as non-infectious and non-transmissible among people. NCDs can refer to chronic diseases which last for long periods of time and progress slowly. Non-threshold dose response. A model of dose response with no safety threshold, i.e., always harmful. Pandemic. A pandemic is an epidemic of infectious disease that has spread through human populations across a large region. For instance, multiple continents, or even worldwide. Pathogen. A pathogen or infectious agent is a biological agent that causes disease or illness to its host. Persistence. A dormant, persistent state of a bacterial population. Physical hazard. A physical hazard is a type of occupational hazard that involves environmental hazards that can cause harm with or without contact. Physical hazards include ergonomic hazards, radiation, heat and cold stress, vibration hazards, and noise hazards. Risk. A situation involving exposure to danger. Risk assessment. A risk assessment is a process to identify potential hazards and analyze what could happen if a hazard occurs. Risk management. Risk management is the identification, assessment, and prioritization of risks. Solubility. Solubility is a chemical property referring to the ability for a given substance, the solute, to dissolve in a solvent. Teratogen. Any agent that can disturb the development of an embryo or fetus. Threshold dose response. Where the dose crosses over the level that is safe. Toxic chemical. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency or EPA defines a toxic chemical as any substance which may be harmful to the environment or hazardous to your health if inhaled, ingested or absorbed through the skin. Toxicity, but no one really puts the ID in it. Toxicity is the degree to which a substance can damage an organism. Toxicology. Toxicology is the scientific study of adverse effects that occur in living organisms due to chemicals. Transmissible disease. A contagious disease wherein the pathogen is transmissible from one host to another. Tuberculosis. A potentially serious infectious bacterial disease that mainly affects the lungs.
Alright, here are a few summaries/connections. Types of major health hazards. Biological hazards. Pathogens that are living organisms, protists, bacteria, fungi, and viruses that can cause human disease. Chemical hazards. In the air, soil, and water we drink and food we ingest. Pesticides, heavy metals, PCBs, asbestos. Physical hazards. Fires, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods and storms. Cultural hazards: living in areas with high crime rates, working in unsafe conditions, frequent driving on highways, and poverty. Lifestyle hazards: choices made by humans that pose a concern. Biological hazards: even with the advances in technology and medicine for the past 50 years, cardiovascular diseases, which is a non-transmissible disease, are still the leading cause of human deaths. Poverty and the location of where you live are both factors that increase your chance of contracting infectious diseases. If the disease is limited to one area, it is called an epidemic, and if it spreads globally, the disease is referred to as a pandemic. Infectious diseases are diseases such as HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis. Humans are constantly exposed to chemical compounds created through human activities like burning fossil fuels. These chemicals enter living organisms through inhalation, ingestion, or absorption through skin. The study of how these chemicals affect organisms is called toxicology. Key characteristics of toxicology: persistence. Some chemicals will last for a long time in the environment because they are not easily degraded. Solubility. Chemicals that are fat-soluble easily accumulate in the tissue of living organisms. Chemicals that are water-soluble will easily dissolve in water. Biomagnification. Certain compounds that accumulate in body tissues can be passed from one organism to another through the food chain. Toxicity level of a substance. A dose is the amount of a substance is exposed to an organism. The response is any negative effect caused by the dose of a toxic material. Two types of responses: acute effect, immediate response to exposure; chronic effect, exposure to single dose/long-term small dose. Causes long-lasting / permanent damage to the body. Types of chemical hazards: carcinogen, cause / promote various cancers; mutagen, promotes mutations in DNA; teratogens, cause birth defects to a fetus or embryo. Alright, summary's over, now it's time for some legislation.
Mike's back to me. Alright, taking it slow again. Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act (FIFRA) gives the EPA the authority to regulate the sale, packaging, distribution, and disposal of pesticides. Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act allows the EPA to set tolerance levels for pesticide residue on food for human consumption as well as on feed meant for livestock consumption. Food Quality Protection Act of 1996 amended previous two laws. It outlines more requirements for assessing tolerance levels for pesticides. Also provides more funding for protection of infants/children. Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. Known as Right to Know Act, this legislation requires federal, state, and local governments to improve public knowledge and access to information regarding toxic chemicals.
And now, finally, here are the tips that I may have promised a while ago. You will be expected to know these common environmental toxins: PCBs, DDT, phthalates, atrazine, bisphenol A, heavy metals: mercury, arsenic, lead, cadmium, benzene, vinyl chloride, asbestos, dioxins. The AP exam will test your knowledge on how human activities impact the natural selection of organisms in our environment. Alright folks, that's all, and good luck.